Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight. Happy 2020. Today we have Masaki Miyagawa with us again. Very happy that he is here. And his website is akaida.com, where you can find a lot of very useful energy tools like this one. Well, your name is not, you can only see AID.
Oh yeah, I have to move it over. AKAIDA. Yeah,
The Pyramid Man.
yeah, that's me.
So, Masaki, welcome.
Well, hi Judith, great to be back. And we just barely started 2020, and it kind of follows what a lot of us have been kind of feeling, predicting. And it's going to be an interesting year. But I can tell you this also, even though this year may be, I would say chaotic, it's going to be pretty chaotic. But this year, I want to emphasize it's also a time for people to do what they want to do. This whole year is under every year, one sign of the zodiac of the 12 signs is boosted, right? This year it's Jupiter in Capricorn, Jupiter expansion, making it larger, putting the focus. Capricorn, you know, has to do with it's like institutional structures, government, banking, but simply business. So this year it's really be about your business, and the time is now. There's really no other time. So it's time to really go out and do what you were born to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, it didn't take long when Trump assassinated that
Yeah.
general in Iran. And now people are going bonkers with this hashtag World War III. And I would say be careful what you put your energy into, because you are manifesting whether you know it or not. And if millions of people put their energy into hashtag World War III,
You're gonna get
guess
World War
what?
III. Yeah.
And we are not saying you can't discuss it with your
Mm-hmm.
friends, family, or think about it. That's not the point. Of course, it has the potential. The potential is there. But as always, we need to charge it.
Well, I watched your interview with James Bartley,
Mm.
and you guys brought up some very good points, especially around like polarity and then us versus them, or I'm right and you're wrong. If you
Mm.
look at the trend worldwide, it's very polarized, right? And I'm
Yeah.
not saying that you shouldn't have your position, but you have to realize that uh, it's gotten to the point where close friends, family members, your family, right,
Mm.
completely at odds. And I saw this funny meme. It was a photo. It was during the holidays, which just passed. It was a family dinner, and like a guy's like this, and he's yelling, "They're all effing pedophiles." So it's gotten to that point, right? But at the
Mm.
end of the day, when the structures collapse, Trump's not gonna be there for you. Putin's not gonna be there for you, right? Q's not gonna be there for you. Your family is the only, your close friends, your dear friends and family are the only things you have. So people really have to take a step back and try to be as non-reactive as possible. That doesn't mean that you're disinterested, but emotionally you have to take a step back and say, does this make sense? Or, how are people relating to each other today?
Mm.
Mhm.
Do you have any thoughts on when that happened? That specific date?
Are you talking about when things got more polarized?
No, 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 no. I mean when at the assassination of Mr. Suleiman.
Oh, if that even really happened. To me it's very scripted, and you
Mm.
you also have to take into account that um Iran hasn't had a sovereign government since the 1940s, right? Since the Shah, who
Mm-hmm.
was, put in by the Americans.
Yeah.
He was basically like Saddam Hussein. He was doing a good job until he wanted more of the oil profits, and then they said, "Okay, we're taking you out," and they put the
Time to go.
Ayatollah Khomeini in, right?
Mm,
So you have to wonder. I'm not saying it isn't organic, but you really have to wonder: is this at some level, and even maybe a lot of the Iranian government may not even be totally know about this, if what I'm presenting could be the case, but is it being concerted from both sides, like many world wars have been planned, to come to this point where it's very simple, right? The Americans bombed and killed the general, and now the Iranians have justification to do a big event like a 9/11, and that moves it to the next stage, right? Very clean, clear, simple narrative for the average person in the public to understand and buy into.
mm,
So I would just say that as far as the trends and those kinds of things, it happened a little before the Saturn Pluto conjunction, which is happening on the 12th, which is just in the next week, right? That should really kick off. To me, that would be a marker when things really kick off. But, we did have the eclipse on the 26th and all these kinds of things. But in general, I would say that although I pay very close attention to all these transits, but I think we mentioned in the last talk we had, the time for the real study and learning, I think, is over. It's now
mm,
time to go operational, go active.
mm,
So should maybe put more energy into planting the new seeds, doing the new thing, pushing, even if it's just a hobby, because I work with the orgone or orgonite pyramids every day, right? Some people, they just buy them and collect them as fun energy tools. Some people do it here and there on the weekend as a hobby, but start doing something that puts power in your hands, right? Because we're all sovereign individuals. I have an article about 2020 based on numerology, and I did add some astrology to back up what I was saying. But 2020 is basically Aquarius Uranus energy, which is inherently destructive because Aquarius is the sign of revolution, right? So it's breaking down the old and pushing the new, right? So you can see in many ways it's been happening, but now there's going to be a big push this year by the powers that be. They are basically in the poker game, all chips in, because they even state they have the 2030 plan. So the next 10 years, this is the time when they are going to move the world stage to the next phase, right?
mm,
But guess what? That they are highly aware of cycles. They are highly aware of astrology and so forth. They're doing this year for a reason, but it works for everybody. If you want to start building your plan of how you want your life to be, you can do that too. If you just sit back and watch the world events and don't do anything, then you're basically at some level saying, I'm subject to the powers that be. I give
mhm,
up. But
mhm.
guess what? You can take that energy and do something for yourself. So that's really what I want to emphasize. But it is both. It will be chaotic. Even when I came out with this article, it was in September of 2019. I put it out in the fall because I wanted some time for people to be able to read what I had said, right? And at that time, I think there was only the yellow vests in France and Hong Kong. But then shortly after, there was like Bolivia, Chile, a bunch of other countries, and it's going to be more. I think probably virtually every region will have some kind of protests by the end of 2020 this year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So in general, there is, yeah, you could say there are people out there that think all these divinations, be it astrology or numerology, that's from the devil and
Right.
hands off. then, oh, okay, of course, you have those people who look into it,
Mm-hmm.
who understand that having some occult knowledge is pretty important, actually, so
Mm-hmm.
that because they are playing you
Yeah.
along those energies. And then you have those people that are saying, oh, that is just a bunch of crook shit.
Well, I will say this. So, I started doing numerology readings. So these are esoteric, personal readings based
Mm,
on the birthday and
mhm,
the name. Typically, it's the name on the birth certificate. If
mhm,
women take on a married name, then I'll run two charts to see where you started or where you are now. But you'll often hear whether it's astrology, tarot, numerology. There's even intuitive readings. There's many methods, right?
yeah.
Oh, you believe in that, right? Oh, you believe in that stuff?
Mm,
These people are asking the wrong question. It's not,
mm,
do you believe it? The question they should be asking is, does it work? Is it
mm,
accurate? And I can tell you, if you have the right method and you have a good reader, it is extremely accurate. So then I tell, I flip it back. I hit the ball back in the other person's court and I say, it works. So I have my ideas about why it works, but you have to ask yourself, why does this work? Because it does not fit into the 3D model, the materialist 3D model that we are taught
mm.
typically in school, society, and so forth. And I could go into why I think these reading systems work,
Yeah.
So.
And I think in general, everything that is supporting, yeah, that you get to know yourself better,
Mm-hmm.
all that is either condemned, demonized, or ridiculed.
Well, and also, I think across the board, uh, as a race, as the human race, we have low self-esteem,
Hmm.
and I could get into that also later, as I think that's a big part of why the AI and the technological route is a possible salvation that they're putting out there, which people are gravitating to it towards.
Mm,
Because if you have a low self-esteem, and a lot of this is from people's own traumas, their own experience in this life, but as a race, we have been through many cycles of rise and disastrous collapse of civilizations, you
mm,
know so we have a trauma from that. So not just like personal, or maybe scientists have proven there is such a thing as genetic memory.
yes.
So say for the blacks in America, or the Americas, you don't think hundreds of years of slavery has imprinted some kind of trauma, right? But you gotta have to think, as a planetary human race, the rise and collapse and famines and wars, this has been going on for millennia. That is still imprinted on us. That's why we probably can't remember where we've been. Uh, but now is the time when we're starting to figure out who we are, and there's only two real questions in so-called religion or spirituality: is who am I and why am I here? That's the only, everything goes back to these two, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And where do we trace it back to? Does it come out of Babylon, numerology?
Uh, yeah, well, you can, a lot of things, because I had sent you some articles I have on my
Mm,
Patreon
mhm. Yeah, I
about,
looked at that.
oh,
That
yeah.
was interesting.
So it was about occult Japan, or hidden Japan.
Mm,
So you know that Japan is heavily based on the Buddhist culture,
mhm,
which was imported from China and Korea. But Buddhism comes from Central Asia, and it's undeniable it is connected to India, but they often do not talk about, there's a very strong Persian connection.
Mm-hmm.
And, Persia, I think, at least to me, it's in the mass consciousness. It's not really, you hear about Egypt a lot, right? You
Mm-hmm.
hear some people are into Zechariah Sitchin, Anunnaki, Mesopotamia. You don't hear the word Persia that much, right?
Mm.
But a lot of things go to basically Iraq, the Persia sphere, Mesopotamia, like that. But that was, as far as I understand, that was a more recent base that rose up after civilizations that were more far to the north. And they call it the Vedic Rus. They were more around Hyperborea, I think, is above the Rhine, but is basically the more northern Europe and even towards the North Pole. There were other civilizations you also don't hear about, like I think it's called the Vinca civilization in the Balkans, because Vinca and Japan have a connection also, because the style of pottery, which I had some examples, the style of pottery in Japan going back like 10, 14,000 years is the same as in the Balkans. So, yes, we have certain areas that were cultural centers, but there is a longer narrative. So at one time or another, certain places were important, but if you go back and back and back, the legends say, at least for the so-called the Vedic culture, because I would say maybe the Australian Aboriginals are the one group that kind of has a very unique history to themselves. But everybody else has some influence from Vedic culture, I would say. And the Vedics, they say they came from the far north, maybe coming through a portal through the North Pole. I have no way to prove that, but that's what they say. So
yeah, the Aryans.
yeah, the Orions, which
Orions.
which you wanted to, when we talked, before this interview, you wanted to talk a lot about Orions, but it's such a complicated topic that I don't have a full grasp on it. But I would say this: I think first, people just look at the mythology, but for so much time, effort over millennia to keep these stories and present them in art, but then also build megalithic temples and have them aligned to certain star constellations. Obviously, this has a great significance. And the Orion group, so the Orion constellation, Orion, Arian, right? It's a conglomeration or a collection of different groups. So it's not just like one type that was coming from Orion. But definitely Vedic culture, which most people think of as like India sphere, which they are Vedic, like the so-called Hindu. But, the Norse gods is basically the same gods. It's under different names. So I would say the more Nordic or white European type, and down to Mediterranean, Egypt, and then also the India, subcontinent of India, that was all Vedism. But then it was, today, basically the modern system is a Anglo-British dominated modern world, right? But before, the hot topic right now is Tartaria and so forth.
Yeah.
But basically there was some kind of Rus empire. But Rus, my personal opinion is the Rus encompassed all of the so-called white peoples, but it included, Asiatic Turks, and it's Eurasia, right? From Spain all the way to Siberia is Eurasia. But, this culture, just like Western culture is the modern culture today, the Vedic culture encompassed the globe also. So it reached into Latin America, Americas, and so forth.
Yeah.
Hmm.
When you do readings, do you use the Pythagorean system?
Okay, so for numerology, there's two main types. The most popular type is the so-called Pythagorean
Mm.
numerology from supposedly the Pythagorean school. You know, like
Mhm.
Pythagoras, the triangle Pythagorean theorem. That's the most common, and that's what I started with.
Mm.
But after a few years, I started incorporating the so-called Chaldean, or it's a
Mhm.
kind of a Babylonian numerology, which I hear is somewhat close to the Kabbalistic
Mm.
numerology. But the difference is in
They
Pythag.
don't use the number 9.
Well, uh, also the Pythagorean system, they will say that each combination of a number is the same reading. So example, uh Chinese love 8. I bring this up because it's Capricorn season. Capricorn means Saturn, right? So Chinese love 8. Why did they love 8? You go to China, any Chinatown, you see 888 seafood. Because 8 is like, it's like lucky, prosperity, money,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
because 8 is the number of Saturn or Capricorn, which is business, right?
Mm.
Money. So they, in Pythagorean system, they will say if you're born on the 8th of the month, or the 17th, 1 and 7 is 8, or the 26th, 2 and 6 is 8, all the same. It's not the
Mm.
same. Very similar. Anybody born with the 8 combination will have a strong business skill, business sense, but there's a karmic difference in how it's expressed. And that's what you have in the Chaldean system. And you can connect numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each number can connect to a planet. So then you
Yeah.
you can overlap astrology with numbers. And so, basically, what is the benefit of having an esoteric reading? We are pulling back the surface, pulling back the veil, and seeing what's just underneath. What is the personality? Because each person is like, has a poker hand, right? So each person has a particular setup. Based on that, some people will be better. Some people that are more charismatic, they like to talk. Maybe we'll put him in PR, right? Public relations, advertisement, promotions. Some people are more, maybe if they're more Virgo-esque, right? More tabulation, filing, calculation. Maybe he's more suited for accounting. So everybody has particular skill, but it's not told to us when we're growing up. As soon as you're born, I'm sure in past times they would say, "Oh, this person is going to be." Actually, I can give a direct example of that. The Siddhartha Gautama, the historical Buddha,
Mm.
right? They said when he was born, they had some seers, and the Buddha's family, in my opinion, is originally came from Persia, but they were kicked out and they ended up around like Pakistan. They called Sakistan the land of the Scythians back then, right? They said this boy Siddhartha, he will either be a
Mm.
great military leader, and actually, they were Cossacks basically, so that would make sense. He will either be a great military leader or a great spiritual leader.
Mm.
So they could have done that purely intuitively, but even today in astrology, they have the fixed stars, and those are related to Persian astrology.
Mm.
And they say, the 3 wise men that visited baby Jesus, they're Persians, and then they, stars, they followed the stars. So I would say today, even though society, see, I mean, we're talking right now from LA, to, are you in Berlin? You're in Germany,
No,
right?
no, no. I'm very close to the Dutch border.
Oh, okay. But we're like 9 hours separated, right?
Mm.
But we are communicating through the internet, through laptop equipment. Seems to be very modern, but actually it is extremely crude and backwards. You know why? Because there is a kind of like an extreme focus on the 3D material aspect of things today. Whereas in the past, they understood that things are part 3D. It's half material and half energy, but you can call it energy spirit. So then when you take the energetics away, it's totally unbalanced. You're only dealing with one half. You have a blinders view, right? But from the beginning, if you look at the ancient temples, they had the zodiac. They say astrology was the first science and religion, right? Even some of the old synagogues, they have a zodiac, right?
You
Extreme.
even find some churches with crosses on top and with a ring around that. That is also a symbol of the zodiac.
So, you know, this, and like you said, when you get into esoteric reading, you're actually learning about yourself, because guaranteed, even if it's just one aspect, when I read somebody, I say, oh, well, I have that number or I have that aspect. So you're giving the other person advice, but subconsciously you're giving it to yourself, right?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And so esoteric reading systems, whether it's astrology, tarot, numerology, there's sort of a continuum, right? I would say numbers or numerology is much more on the logical side, because you literally calculate, say, for the two main numbers, life path and birthday, that's like 60% of the chart, comes directly out of the month, day, and year that you're born. You just add it together and you'll get the life path number, which is the main number, right? So very logical. And you may not even need a person like me. You can get a book, you flip to it, and it will give the description. So there's a direct correlation. We can see how we got the number. And then over time, they've associated different archetypes. Basically, the world speaks in signs and symbols. It doesn't always necessarily say it in words, but it's somewhat metaphorical, right? But numbers as an entryway is, I think, not as intimidating and much more accessible to the modern person. Because, you know, I could do purely intuitive. And I remember one time, I fly a lot between the States, or LA and Sao Paulo, Brazil, right? So I was sitting next to this girl, and this is 10 plus years ago. So early on, I was doing a lot of training as far as like intuitive, clairvoyant technique, those kinds of things. So I had this girl sitting next to me, we're talking, and then bam, I just start telling her about her life. I said, if she's okay, I'm gonna start to pull some stuff out. Luckily, I didn't think about it, but luckily she didn't freak out, because if somebody's sitting next to you and they start just out of nowhere telling you this reading, right? That can be kind of freaky, right? But if it's numbers, okay, that's not as intimidating, right? But how does this work? Because I can tell you, if you're using the right system and you have an experienced reader, because the system alone will give you, if you know what you're doing, you're going to get the readee will be happy. They'll get a good reading. But I'll tell you, for anybody out there, and there's probably there's a lot of experienced readers that watch you, the other half is the clients themselves, because not everything is in the books. It's in the people.
That's right, yeah.
So when you read the people, things will come up. And after you've done like 100 plus readings, that's what made you good. It wasn't reading the books. That it was reading the books as a starting point, but then you start seeing the patterns of things that are not in the books, you know. But going back to the question, why does this work? Well, there's a lot of talk about what they call so-called simulation theory, right? That we live in a matrix. Let me tell you, it's not a theory. It is reality. And the scientists have also said things that basically it seems to be that we live in a world of intelligent design. because things are not random, right? Even you look at nature, the fractal repeating spirals, the way the plant leaves are shaped, right? 5 ratio has a power to it, right? Even a Nubian pyramid here, direct 5 ratio, it's the 1 to the, it's like 1.618, I think, the slant 5 ratio, golden ratio. So there's definitely a framework that our world is built on.
Yeah.
And if you start getting, so there's many ways that you can approach this, but because in the last 4 years or something, I've been doing numerology readings, and then I'm a novice at astrology, but I have a working knowledge of astrology. You start to realize that, what do they say about each sign? What does each sign relate to? Good time to talk about this because we're in Capricorn season, right? Capricorn, also the sign of the devil, ruled by Saturn, right? And they say this world, the Christians, they say, the Abrahamic faith, this world is the world of Satan, the devil, right? The 3D material world. Well, why is that? Because if you've, looked into a lot of metaphysics and what people say about the world we live in, they say there's a kind of a Saturn matrix, or a Saturn moon matrix that controls this world, right? And Saturn is basically physical material reality. And so that's how these esoteric reading systems work, because it's not by random. There are very set, predetermined types. They're almost like the seasons, right? You have the 4 seasons. We're in winter, spring, summer, fall, predictable. Every season, the summer is going to be hot, winter should be cold, right? We have light and we have dark. We have the sun, we have the moon. We have the male, we have the female. Although now that's up in the air, right? Right? But there, basically, you have hot, you have cold. There are definite archetypes that exist, and archetypes are basically it's like a symbol or a sign, or it's a character type. Human beings are like cartoons, actually, so it's not by random. It's based on the fact that we live in a Saturn based hard material world right now. And so even, let's say, the Chinese, the I Ching, right? They call Bagua. It's the 8, the hexagram. Like hex, you put a hex on somebody, a voodoo curse. Hex relates to Saturn because Saturn it literally has a hexagram on the top. It's a hypercube. Each planet is associated with a color and a shape, and let's say Earth is blue, Venus is green, Saturn is black.
In
because
German, the German word for witch is Hexe.
That's right. Now,
there you go.
So even Chinese and the hexagrams, it's almost like a computer code, right? There's I can't remember how many. I think there's 3 lines, and depending if it's a dash or broken line and a full line, there's a whole book of saying or a little poem to describe each hexagram. But they've run actually the I Ching through like a computer, and there's a definite pattern. And then even the so-called the Bible or the Kabbalah, the Talmud, a lot of the Orthodox Jewish very much into Bible code, right? It could even be the case that the reason why there's a code in there is because it was made by some kind of computerized system in the far past. But basically reading systems, it's not by random. They were set up and developed on the understanding that we live in an organized system, right? of intelligent design that adheres to certain laws. So that's how it works. And I believe that, well, if you look at probably a lot of Harry Potter fans out there, if you look at the old archetypes of the magician, right? There was a time of alchemy where so-called science and the occult were side by side. But I think that in the so-called Enlightenment period, when they told people, or the narrative is, we got rid of that superstition and we're now at a higher level, what they really did is where they would teach, say, algebra and, above board mathematics, along with something like a numerology, literally Pythagorean numerology, right? They dropped out the metaphysical, but only for the public. They kept the occult knowledge and put it in their pocket. So now if you're presenting, this is all we're dealing with, but you have the mastery of the stars and the understanding of the archetypes, you have a great level of control. It's like you have the cheat codes while you're just telling the public this is all it is, but then you have both halves and you hid one half and you gave the other half to the public. That's my thinking of what happened.
Yeah, exactly. That makes perfect sense. So, okay, the Chaldean system doesn't include the number 9.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason given is that it is very strongly connected to infinity.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, and then the 369 of Tesla, right? It's like,
yeah,
it goes back.
So,
it goes back.
Yeah, and you know that 9 has all these properties, like 1 plus 9 is 9, 2 plus 9 is 11. You always end up where you started. Yeah, and you can do that endlessly. And if you start multiplying, 1 times 9 is 9. 2 times 9 is 18. You always end up with 9. And you can also do that endlessly. Does that have to do with what they are talking about? It's strongly connected to infinity?
Well, I can just go off of what I know from the numbers. And the number cycles, because from the day you're born, things go on sort of a biorhythm. It goes 1 to 9. So one would be like the Aries or the baby. Could also maybe be considered like the sun sign because it's alpha. Number 1 is number 1, right? But you go through all the numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 9. 9 is at the other end. So 9 is said to represent the old soul, or the bodhisattva, the one that's been through all the incarnations or learned the lessons of all the roles. So 9 is considered a humanitarian number, but with maybe a kind of Aquarian quality because it has to deal with groups. Like we're kind of talking one-to-one right now, but 9 would be humanitarian, but dealing with groups or society. And number 9 is also connected to Mars energy. But like I was saying, I only know the systems that I'm working with, but I have done some readings for Orthodox Jewish people. And one woman, she told me that what I told her was very similar to what her rabbi had told her.
Okay.
But, I wouldn't be surprised because, like I said, you basically, the method is just the convention. So no matter what method you use, if it's astrology, numerology, tarot, we should be coming to similar conclusions. It's just the way that you want to approach it,
Yeah. So when you incorporate the Chaldean system, let's say somebody is born on the 9th. How does that work?
Okay, so the way that, giving away secrets, but it might be good tips for you numerology people out there, because I taught myself. I'm self-taught. The way that I do it now. Okay, first I'll go from the beginning. When I started, I was doing Pythagorean calculation or numerology by hand. And then before I would do, well, first I wanted to see if it worked. I did a number of free readings just to prove to myself that it's accurate. And then after that, I would calculate it, and then I would go over the aspects, and I would probably spend a couple hours just writing out all the aspects, and then I would do the live reading, which was good education for me, or that really gets it in your head if you write it out. Now I've done enough, I can just quickly look at the numbers and I know what I'm dealing with. But to set the stage or set the direction, okay, where kind of like what personality am I dealing with, I'll look quickly at the person's zodiac sign, where they are in astrology, and then I believe it's called the decan. Each sign is divided into the 10 degrees. So you have the first 10 degrees, the middle, the 10 to 20, and then 20 to 29. So there's 3 parts of each sign. So for me, I'm at the beginning of Scorpio, so I'm like Scorpio. But if I was in the middle or end, it has a planetary co-ruler. So you could say, oh, this person is this sign, but they have a lot of fire. They're more of a Aryan, or they might have some Sag energy, Jupiter energy. So depending on the zodiac sign and where they are in the sign, I go, okay, we're dealing with a Gemini. So then taking that, when I look at the numbers, it reinforces where we're going with this. So that's kind of how I do the readings now. So I look at where they are in the astrology. It gives me an idea, because these are just types. They're like they're the 12 personality types, right? So if it's Aries, it's going to be different than somebody that's like Scorpio or something like that. Each sign is different. Or we'll take the Joe Rogan, Alex Jones opposition, because one's a Leo and one's an Aquarian, right? So they're going to be on the opposite ends. But with that, then majority I'm going off of the chart, and then using intuition to fill in the gaps. Yeah, that's the way I do it.
What you just said, the deacon, that reminded me, you will find that in the church as well. There are
the deacons, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have cardinal signs in
Cardinals,
astrology, and like cardinal fire, cardinal water, and and of course you have cardinals.
And then you have Papa at the top, opening you up to the BS of the world. The cardinals they're like the hinges on the door that opens you up to Papa, which is going to tell you the wrong thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if they are telling you that is all very bad stuff, it's from the devil, then you might ask yourself.
Well, my personal opinion is that in general, now this may disturb some people, but I think there's no real good or bad. Now, if you kill somebody or you're abusing somebody, you best believe that there's a retribution for that. You shouldn't harm other people. But in the larger scheme, when you pull way out, there is a so-called transmigration of souls, right? At least from what I've seen. Although some people say even that is just some kind of lower level convention, and we don't really need to go through all these incarnations and the karma and everything. But at a certain level, you pull out these polarities, or again, the polarity, right? These oppositions of the good and evil, the light and the dark, are here to cause a friction. It creates a kind of an energy, and these are kind of situations that we learn from. So yeah, I mean, I'm not embarrassed to say it. On some other timeline, some other so-called past life, I did some really bad stuff. But guess what?
We all did.
Yeah. But guess what? Where I was maybe doing dark magical work in some other time, that totally informs what I'm doing now. Because I have a kind of a natural affinity or understanding of the framework, and it's just a tool. It's which way do you want to flip it, right? So at least for me in this life, people are pretty happy with the tools I'm making. So
Yeah. So let's stay a little bit with number 9. Anton LaVey once said that the real satanic number is 9. And if you look at 666, that boils down to 9.
I would say that's probably true. Well, one, it's 9 is Martian, right? It's very aggressive. It's Mars, Aries energy. But it's interesting that one of the, I guess, explicitly satanic numbers is 18. 1 and 8 is 9, and it's also 18.
And that is the first result out of 666.
And it's 666. So if you have somebody born on the 18th of the month, that's considered the struggle between spiritual and material. And either they will do things for material gain or be a so-called gold digger, right? Although it's typically applied to women, men can do it too.
No, of course.
Or because, even in astrology, if it's not in you, you're going to attract somebody with that. They could be a relatively good person, but they will attract partners or people that will use them. And I've done readings, and a typical one was a woman, and she was divorcing her husband. And I noticed she had an 18 birthday. And I said, say, any men you've been with and they have bad credit and they say, I'm kind of in a difficult spot right now. So if it's okay, why don't you buy the car and then it's in your name and I'll just make payments on it. And she goes, oh yeah, that's my husband. So, oh, and then Billie, I don't know if you know this young artist, singer, Billie Eilish. She's an 18 birthday. And she seems to be, the fashion and the style is very dark, but at the same time, there's sort of a preset like distribution of numbers. It's almost like a population, right? You're going to, just from the fact that there's every month, it's like 1 to 30 or 1 to 31. Or I guess February, it's like 28, right? February. But you're basically going to have like 1, 2, 3, 4 down to the end of the month. That already sets that there's going to be certain personality types born on each day. And then through the zodiac, the 12 signs, right? There is a regular distribution of personality types. So at some level, we have a great deal of power that we're not tapping into because people don't know what they're working with, But at the simultaneous time, we have much less power than we think we do. Because I think a lot of things are predetermined at some level. Like maybe you have the ability, because I can tell you, although in the larger scheme, there's no good or bad numbers, but there are definitely numbers that are more difficult than others. And so, I can look at somebody's chart, and I'm typically one that I'm going to be real with you. I'm not going to hold back because I'm like, man, your chart's jacked up. It's like, I can look and I go like, man, you must have been through some stuff. But I think we do have the ability, some people more than others, to push the track a little bit this way or this way. But I do believe a lot of things are predetermined, especially if the person has number 4 or number 8 prominent in the chart. Because Saturn relates to heavy karma. And then the Aquarius number 4 in this year's 2020, right? It's a 22-4. It's a year of, heavy things can happen. But yeah, I think that, and if I connect this to Buddhism, it's always been a great debate about which is the correct method or worldview, because the original Buddhists, supposedly like the Buddha, uh, the monks with the saffron robe, those are they call Theravada, or like
Theravada, yeah.
they're the original Buddhists that they they emulate the teachings and lifestyle of the Buddha to attain Buddhahood, right? To attain enlightenment, right?
Mm.
Then you have the other school, the so-called Mahayana, which is more there's thousands of texts or sutras that are pure mythology. That's what the Theravada people, they say, what the hell is this stuff? This is like tales. There's just like stories. And the Mahayana people say, yeah, we know, but we're just trying to tell a good story. It's it's like a metaphor, right? But out of Mahayana, which is a lot of these Buddhas that are not the historical Buddha. They're like, my school is the Amida, or Chinese say Amitofo, right? The Buddha of the West. There's also Zen Buddhism. Everything that's not the saffron robe Buddhist is Mahayana.
Yeah.
So there's this concept of self-power and other power. The Zen is kind of like, it's almost libertarian. From my bootstraps, I'm going to, by force of will, power of the will, I will become a Buddha through the iron will, right? That's one side. But then the Pure Land Buddhism, which my reverend, now retired in the Buddhist temple here in LA, Reverend Masao Kodani, he's a Japanese American, but he lovingly called our school the trash can school of Buddhism, because it was basically made popular in Japan as the farmer's religion. Because after you're toiling in the field for like 10 hours, you don't have no energy to do the calligraphy that the samurai and nobles, or the flower arrangement and meditation. You just say, Namo Amida Butsu, like for, saying the name of Amida. That's the other end, is other power that you really have no control in and it fits very much into the life of the commoner in the past. The farmers, you can plan as much as you want. They were highly aware of the lunar cycles, when to plant, but there could be storms. There could be a heat wave. Your whole year, your whole planning is destroyed. You have no control. So, but I think both is true. It's a continuum that you have to realize that you have to have the self-responsibility to have the impulse to do something. But it's also the fact that at some level we have a lot less control than we think. They call it jiriki and tariki. Jiriki is self-power, tariki is other power. Yeah.
I was introduced to a very different explanation of Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana.
Oh, the Tibetan.
Yeah. And,
well, I'm not a Buddhist scholar, but I'm just telling you that in general, Theravada is the original teachings they follow.
But would you like to hear that?
Oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So in Theravada, okay, the Buddha had the stance that it makes no sense to have a glass like this and to try to put a leader into it.
Yep.
Yeah. So he taught according to what he felt the student was ready to comprehend. And with the Theravada, he basically gave the teachings of cause and effect. And then there was another category of students, and that was Mahayana, that had a little bit more compassion for their fellow beings. And then he taught them about those things. And in Vajrayana, that is, yeah, let's say the Ferrari, so-called Ferrari
Mhm.
to Buddhahood,
Oh, yeah.
because that works primarily um, with identification, meaning you identify with the Buddha
Mhm.
and you pull over this mask and wear it until you can't get it off. It
Mhm.
becomes you. You know what I mean?
Well, I can tell you that definitely, because one major realization, we may
Mm.
have talked about this on the past talk, but I grew up in the temple.
Hmm.
I'm totally American. My family's been here probably 100 something years now. But I had a different experience than most people in Japan because they don't really go to a temple. The Buddhist, if you get married, you go to Shinto shrine.
Hmm.
If you have a funeral, then they go to the Buddhist temple. But typically, people don't even go. I mean, it's just like anywhere in the world now. People don't go to church. Most people don't go to church. They don't go to temple. So I was going to temple, pretty much every weekend here in LA. But it was, even though it's totally out in the front, even in the name of the Buddha, right? He's a Scythian, he's a Cossack, even from connected Saxony in Germany, right? I didn't realize until the last maybe 5+ years that there's a strong connection to Central Asia and the steppe culture, you know?
Hmm.
And actually, this is one question too. I don't want to deviate, but I'll just throw it out there so it gets said. I've noticed that Germany they seem to have a strong connection to Mesopotamia, but then the Anglo-British always look to Egypt. There's sort of a split there. I
Mm.
don't know why,
Yeah,
but
we have
yeah,
we have the replica of the Ishtar Gate in Berlin.
yeah, that's something I would like to see. That's something I would like
I've
to
seen
see.
it.
Yeah.
I've seen it. Mm.
So, but yeah, talking about the Tibetans is, I think a lot of their motifs is coming out of the same culture as like the Scythians and the steppe culture, because they have even those skull chalices that the Scythians used to use too. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
um, and in I would say like the more, even though I would say all of Buddhism is esoteric, but there are some that are considered more occulted.
Mm.
There's a sect in Japan called Shingon, or they call it
Hmm.
Koya-san because it's at Mount Koya or Koya Mountain. So it's Koya, and then San in Japanese is mountain, right? So they say Koya-san is a nickname, or
Mm.
Shingon. What do they do every year but a flower ritual? That's Zoroastrianism. It's the cult of Mithras. It's
Yeah.
coming from Central Asia. I don't connect it so much to India. I connect
Mm.
it more to that area. Maybe you could say it's North India,
Yeah.
because the
And
Persia India sphere had an overlap, but it's in that area of like Afghanistan, Pakistan, that area.
yeah. And with Mithra, you have again these images with his cape and
Mm-hmm.
the Pleiades um, on it, and there you have another Orion connection as well. So yeah.
Well, the whole, who knew the Smurfs were so significant, right? The
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Smurfs.
Well, this is one of the upcoming articles I'm going to write, but it's on the cone heads and the Scythian cap, or the Phrygian cap, or some say
Hmm.
the Liberty cap, the Smurf hat. That is a worldwide phenomenon, but it was, and I guess Christians would call the Israelite cap. But to this day, Japanese in the ritual clothing,
Mm.
basically they are wearing Scythian hats, but they may not be red. They could be like black. I think that's maybe a Confucian influence. The color turned black, but they're basic, and it's called eboshi. It's called crow's cap, and there's a whole
Hmm.
thing with the bird. There's the bird clan and the snake clan. There's kind
Yeah.
of like two opposite groups that have been fighting back and forth. But Japan seems to be, and there's an overlap too, because even in China, they'll have the phoenix, but it's the dragon bloodline, the dragon throne, the emperor, right? So sometimes you see both, but there's two groups that have been going back and forth over millennia. And Japan, you see the suru, the crane, but you could say bird motif everywhere, even JAL, they have the crane, right? And the first imperial town in Japan is called Asuka. It's near Nara. It's near Kyoto. And Asuka, if you look at the characters, it's literally flying birds. So it's the bird tribe. That's another article. I have a Patreon. That's a Pyramid Power Patreon. So I'm putting a lot of articles up there. Just things I've noticed. And I'm presenting it more that these are motifs and these are the connections I made. I'm not saying I have the total answer, but at least we can see that there's an association. And then beyond, if you want to get into the whole ancient aliens area or whatever, I leave that to other people, because that's you start to get into some, it's controversial, you know, but at least cultural motifs, I can obviously show that there is connections that people don't really talk about. Because if you talk about Japan, even the basic, you know, intro books, and it's true, highly influenced by China and Korea. But in all of Asia, there is a heavy, heavy connection with the Middle East and Central Asia, which is never talked about. And if not by bloodline, culturally, we are connected to the steppes, the Japanese. Even this, typically, you know, a lot of you know, I'm not sure where the Asian type came from, but say like Chinese would probably be the root of the Asiatic type. But they don't typically have facial hair. But you see a lot of the Koreans and Japanese have a beard or mustache. That's coming from somewhere. So.
Yeah, that's coming from somewhere. Yeah. So going back to 666, we find that number also in Revelations. And it's the number of a man, and that I find that interesting, because that brings us back to carbon, 6 protons, 6 electrons, 6 neutrons. So that is part of our DNA. So and you know that some people are totally freaked out about the number 666. It strikes fear.
The funny thing is, they're afraid of what they are. That's what it is.
That was my question. Are we afraid of ourselves? Yeah.
Well, I would say the human being is completely insane, completely schizophrenic. Maybe that's why people love Trump so much, because he's a Gemini. So you get both. But basically, the modern human, I would say, is this not in a negative way, like as an egoistic way, but I would say, at least in the realm we're in, the human being is a center point of creation. You know why? Because we're half angel and we're half devil, right? And literally the world, which they say is fallen, because I'm sure you know, the Saturn was said to be the original sun. They call it the black, you know, what's the Nazis, they had the short sun, right? So there's something about Saturn that is particularly key, but it wasn't always the Dark Lord, supposedly in mythology. But there was a point where we kind of fell down a few notches. Obviously, something went wrong, and we fell from the Eden state to some kind of degenerated state, right? But if you just look, and you know, a lot of this, some people want citation and okay, how can you prove, you know, when you start getting into these far areas, how are you going to prove it, right? But
at some point, you can no longer prove it. You
yeah,
have to find it in yourself.
but if you just look at people that have had like near death experience, you
Mm-hmm.
know, so forth, all kinds of paranormal, metaphysical experiences, they say that everybody's watching right now. All of the characters, the players out there, they're all watching Planet Earth. You know why? They want to know what the human's going to do. Well, you have to think too. If you're pure angelic, right? Like a positive, you know, like the cartoonish archetype, the Pleiadians, they're just here to help. If you're pure like good, well, you don't really have free choice in that way. And if you're just like a devil, you don't have free choice either. But what if we made a being that's half angel and half devil, is completely nuts and schizophrenic? We don't know what the hell he's going to do, but let's put him out there and see what he does. That's kind of the human being.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, and I find the craziness and the total confusion, it's coming to the surface more and more and more, especially what you already mentioned, this gender confusion and deliberately confusing children, young people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
That's one of the, you know, although I think people are, well, number one, most people don't even know what the hell's going on. They don't even pay attention to the news. And then the people that consider themselves like, I watch the news, they just read the headline. And then, you know, then you get to the 1% of us that have actually been looking at it for a long time. But it can be controversial. You know, if you say two words about anything now, it's the cancel culture where he's like, oh my God, it's, you know, we've got a Nazi here. I'm probably an alt-right maniac to some people, but I don't consider, well, I'll say this. In 2020, I already made a decision last year. Publicly and privately, I'm going to say less politically just because the way things are going. But I was talking to one guy who's not into our kind of thing at all, but he's highly intelligent. But he said, you know, I like a lot of what you say, but that sounds like a lot of right-wing talking points. You sound like my dad. And I said, I said, well, you know, there is no right and left. The right and left came from the French Revolution, the Masonic tennis court, and they had the Jacobins on one side, and they had the libertarian, I think they're called the Girondins, on the other side. But they're all Freemasons.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, you can call yourself left and you can call yourself right, but now, you know, especially now, like I was saying, with this whole setup of the Iran and Trump, is it really Iran and Trump, or is there a puppet master behind the back telling you that they're right, you know, you're wrong, they're the terrorists, we're the freedom fighters, and all this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
You know, especially from the history of Germany, you know, world wars do not happen by accident. They are planned.
Of course.
You know?
Of
So,
course.
but basically, to wrap up what I was talking with this guy, I said, well, and I wasn't even aiming at him. I was just saying that there is no right and left. If you think that, you got to go back and think about that.
Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. You still don't get it.
And I said, well, you know what they say? They say the left has no brain and the right has no heart. And you know what he said? He says, what are you talking about, man? I have no brain. And I said, well, you consider yourself a leftist then. That's the problem. He totally missed what I was trying to say, you know? But yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I think at this time it's pretty much set. I don't think you can, the people, if they have a seed in them to know, they're going to go on their own and seek the truth. But the people that never had the interest, or just let them be, because come on, it's 2020, guys. It's 2020. Like, these questions about, like, oh, does that exist? Does numerology work? So I would say this: don't believe us, don't believe me. Self-investigation, self-knowledge is the best. So you go out there and you tell me what you find.
Yeah. Before we started recording, you said that you wanted to ask me something.
Oh, I was just asking about the connection with Germany and
okay.
Yeah, because I forget the name. This is bad, but was it Heinrich Schliemann or something like that? He was in
Heinrich
Troy.
Schliemann, yeah.
He was in Troy.
Troy.
Yeah, but I've noticed that there's always a strong association with Germany and Mesopotamia, and then the Anglo-British is always referring to Egypt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Masaki, you blew me away today.
Yeah. Well, I think we touched on it a little bit, but since it's a hot topic, the artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah.
I was saying the human being has a low self-esteem. So this is one thing. I don't know if people have approached it this way, but there's such a some people are very nihilist about it, and I think probably it's inevitable you will have a portion of society that decides to go that machine route, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. But it could be as simple as, have you done your self-work? Do you know who you are? Have you cleared out your traumas as best you can? Because we all have them, and if you didn't have it in this life, we as a race are traumatized from the planet being blown in half multiple times. So with trauma and abuse and those kinds of things, it creates more of what people call the sociopath or psychopath, right? But even the psychopaths, which you find in banking, high finance, politics, the so-called top of the pyramid, right? There's still a little bit of guilt. There's they at some level know that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. But guess what? How do you just kill that little bit of humanity left, or you're so low self-esteem that you have that self-pity? Well, the machine has no emotion. So just kill that little bit of human left and just become machine. This is, I think, a key point that people that are looking at this topic of the technocracy and AI should really think about, because it goes back to the original. Like I said, there's only two questions when you're looking at these so-called spiritual topics: who am I, and why am I here? And I think that a lot of people have not considered the kind of trauma that we've been under for multiple cycles, and then also bring in what I said before. You want to know what's on the playing board, right? So esoteric reading systems, which I encourage people, if you're interested in, I didn't intend to, but I actually taught myself to do numerology readings. But even as a cursory, there's plenty of free sites online. You could just look. And I've been shocked, even the free online readings, like even Chinese astrology, I'm like, this is pretty accurate, right? Yeah. It's an abstract way, it's a non-traditional 3D way to look at the world. So you want to know what's on the board. And I was saying that these esoteric reading systems, it starts to inform you. And it's also by, just experience, right? Is it accurate? I can tell you it's accurate. We live in the Saturn matrix, right? Now, it's like I said before, this world is half material and it's half energetic or frequency, right? But you can call energy spirit. So in the human being, half devil, the Saturn material 3D, but we have some kind of soul or spirit component. These are the two halves, right? So this understanding is holistic, right? It's the two parts, the yin and the yang, or it's the sun or the above the masculine, which is like the 3D, but it's the sacred feminine, which is the intuition. It's the both halves, right? But we're living in a society which 90+% is totally based on materialism or the 3D. They don't see the repercussions of well, we bombed some people. We bombed the brown people in the Middle East. I can steal your pension funds, and so what? Who's going to judge me? There's no God. But if everything's connected by energy, then in point of fact, you're just harming yourself. Maybe it's not at that immediate moment, but it will come back. So you can call this materialist mind the satanic mind. So if you want to become the Lord and ultimate God of this world, yeah, go ahead, become the machine. Because that, you probably will live, you could live 1,000,000 years, but guess what? Even the machine breaks down at some point. So if you project forward, okay, this is what I tell, because a lot of people, there's a lot of fear around this, and I think there's legitimate reasons for that. But
do you think there's, sorry.
Oh yeah, I said go ahead. You people that are singularity people, you go do that, project forward 1,000,000 years, and you're going to end up a little unisex gray with your DNA breaking down because you have no soul. So then the little grays have to build a time machine to go back to steal the real human's DNA to reinvigorate themselves. So
I was just going to ask if what do you think about that the grays is actually us from the future?
It could be. Well, I would say this. It's happened before. It's happening now. It's going to happen in the future. So, if I feel for myself, even though I am telling you, Judith, this year is going to be crazy. And probably I wouldn't be surprised because so we're recording this right, first week or so of 2020 in January. I wouldn't be surprised in the next month or so that there's some kind of new global event like a 9/11 to scare the crap out of everybody. But even with that, it's like we're in a time, like I said, to really, if the powers that be are taking this year, because I won't go too deep into it, but 22 is a master number. So the traditional year count goes 1 to 9. So it's a 4-year, which is Aquarius Uranus energy, which is what's Aquarius? It's like rebel, it's a revolutionary, riots in the streets, right? It's also Trump energy, even though he's a Gemini, he has a lot of like the overturning. So a lot of things going to be changing this year, but literally in 2020, you see 22, right? 22 is a master number. 11, 22, 33. It's a special set. 22 is basically Master Mason or Master Builder. So they are taking this year to initiate, to hit the start button on their 2030 plan, right?
Of course, yeah.
But individually, we can start. Well, you better start moving and start doing what you want, because otherwise you're just saying, okay, well, I'm just going to be subject to the whims. I'm just going along to get along. But, me personally, even though everything's going crazy, I feel very positive. I feel like I was born to be in this time. I'm ready to do what I'm supposed to do. And like I said, for me, I look at it both sides. I'm doing as much as I can, like the Zen monk, Zen Buddhist, by my bootstraps. I'm waking up every morning. I'm processing my orders. I'm crafting my pyramids by hand, right? But at another level, the thing that's going on right now, it's so much larger than any one person can control. And it's like you just have to hope and pray that it ends up in a place that we would enjoy and like. At least you can find your space maybe within the system, because it's such a, and this is a story that's been going through multiple cycles. I would say it's a kind of a spiral. It's happening not exactly in the same way as it did in the past, but it's a repeating pattern. And I think this, that in the Buddhism, what do they have? The wheel of samsara, right? The wheel of illusion and delusion, where you play all these roles. Some are good, some are bad. It's the birth and death, and I'm the wife, and I'm the husband, I'm a child. You play all the roles. You play the good and the bad, but you're still on this hamster wheel going around. I think most of us that have been into our area, we're kind of tired of these. Like, do I really have to play this role again? like, can I get off the hamster wheel? But they say even the gods are trapped on the wheel. They think that that even they probably did have a lot of powers and these kind of things. Well, guess what? You're still on the hamster wheel too. So
yeah.
Yep.
Do you experience that as well? I have. Yeah. It started around, for me personally, it started around December, that more and more things and especially sometimes people that I meet or have some interaction with, they seem to be more and more cartoonish.
Oh,
or when I listen to news,
look at this. Like, well, number one, we Americans have Trump as president. Is this not clown world? Okay, because you could say that George W. Bush was cartoonish, but Trump is over the top. But actually, he's quite funny and entertaining if you really, because I know there's people that really hate Trump. I'm not a Trumper. But until this point now, where we're kind of moving to the next phase, I was kind of neutral on Trump because he's effing ridiculous. He's effing ridiculous. I mean, but then again, Trump is as American as apple pie, as they say. He has a huge ego. He's fat. He literally eats McDonald's every day. He's that, you can't get more American than that. He's like USA, USA, right? I was relatively neutral though, because Trump is a Gemini, so inherently he will do things that are so-called better for our country, and then he'll in the same day do something like, well, why did he do that, right? Now that he's gone into really pushing this, and again, we don't know really what's going on behind the scenes, so I'm just reading it from the surface level of the news items. But now that he's basically going all in on this Iran thing, now I say, okay, now he's revealed that, of course, like he said with James Bartley, that the president of the United States is the president of the United States corporation. He's just the CEO of the imperialist, colonialist country system known as USA, America, right? So the president of the company doesn't set the rules. He's just the figurehead of the company for that time. But the America runs on a business model of extraction and domination of other countries. But I think that this thing seems to be so scripted, it's almost so perfect, that probably it might be the first trigger in the economic reset. And then they're probably hoping, okay, then America totally collapses, and then China's the new
another cartoonish moment for me personally was when they reported that his advisors gave him a list of options how to
Yeah.
react, and they were shocked when he took the most extreme one. How can you be shocked
Yeah.
that he picked the most extreme one? I mean, did you listen to that guy? Everything he's saying is always
Yeah.
huge, tremendous, extraordinary. Of course,
Hey,
he's going for the
Judith,
most. Yeah.
Judith, you're a winner. Are you tired of winning? You're a winner. Well, the thing though is that I think that, see, I already take things one step separated and symbolically.
Mm,
So I'm not looking at Trump the man. I'm
mm,
looking at what he represents.
yeah.
Because, see, that's what people miss. Trump is not a president. He is a force of nature. Like,
Mm,
literally, God put him in there to be president because, you know, America, everything has a cycle. And
mm,
so America is entering the winter. It's entering a decline end phase, just like the Soviet Union had its time,
mm,
or East Germany, the whole Soviet bloc had its time.
mm,
America is entering an ending phase, and there'll be something after, but it won't be the USA that people knew. So I think that he has to be in the, now, of course, he was elected and he had various powers behind him, but it's you look at what's gone on. People that have gone up against Trump, they call it the Trump curse. They've met some bad ends, politically. And I have to wonder, it's almost like the universe or God that's like, his job's not over yet. Trump needs to be in there. But when I say anything so-called positive about Trump, or let's say not negative, right?
mm,
People take that as I'm pro-Trump.
mm,
But what I'm saying is, his slogan is "Make America Great Again," right?
mm,
But what people don't realize is what he's doing with just his personality and the polarization. He is, well, as a positive thing, he fake news. The news is completely done, right? But this is a deconstruction of the system. As far as Hollywood, the reactions and the social justice warrior, and I think it's part of the polarization. I don't think that the kind of movies, the terrible movies they've been making, which don't even make money anymore, which tells you that it's not even about the money anymore. It's about the ideology. They're
mm,
almost like communist propaganda films. That's exposed Hollywood. It's collapsing Hollywood. And even some people attribute, like, oh, well, Trump is, exposing the pedophiles or whatever. I don't know if this is because it's a natural trend, like astrological societal trend, or is it Trump? But you have to think, all these things collapsing, even though Trump is a Zionist, Trump being Trump, his natural chaos, even if he's totally pro-Israel, he's going to mess it up for them too. because Trump is chaos. He is a chaos magician,
he's the
whether
trump card.
whether he knows it or not. And again, he's the tower card, right? Trump
Mm,
Tower. Well, the tower card, again, nothing's good or bad, but if that comes up, some big changes are coming.
mm, mm,
So when I've talked about Trump up until this point, I've been relatively neutral, but I always emphasize that Trump represents the deconstruction of the US and the Western system. But now that this Iran thing has happened, now it's, I just look at those QAnon people, nothing against anybody, but it really shows it's a cult. It's a
yeah.
cult of personality. And unfortunately, nationalism is synonymous with Zionism now.
Mm,
So, uh, you know, it's I was more
And you know, another thing that absolutely makes no sense to me when
uh-huh,
somebody says, I'm against globalism,
uh-huh.
therefore I'm a nationalist. Huh?
Well, the thing is that de facto American nationalism is the
Mhm.
new world order. It's just the American dominated new world order.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they want the American dominated new world order. They just don't want a global extra national international new world order.
Mm.
But it I was much more lenient on the Trumpers because, like I said earlier, the right tends to be more logical and the left tends to be more emotion based, and they generally do want to help people, but they tend not to do their homework. That's just a fact. And the roles have kind of switched because before, let's say in the Reagan era or before, you had a lot of these John Bircher, hard right, libertarian types, or a
Mm.
lot of times it was connected to the Christian right,
Mhm.
where that's more faith based, right? But then what people don't realize is that things have switched. And so the last, maybe from the Obama era, the left started going further and further left until they went off a cliff. So I was giving the Trumpers a little more rope. But now
Mm.
they have, I've seen, at least to me, that now the logic's gone out the window. They're still following Trump, but now it's like, come on, guys. You know,
Mm.
uh, I've seen a lot of memes and bad taste. So it's going to be interesting what happens as we get towards the election here. But in general, I don't think it matters who wins.
Of course not.
I don't think it matters who wins because I did a couple shows on the 2020. I have my notes here, but the setup is explosive.
Mhm.
And also, like I said, 4 and 8 numbers, those are associated with heavy karma. And
Mm.
how many things has the US done to the world? You know.
Do you know his life path number, Trump?
I looked up his chart, but it wasn't that unusual or extraordinary to me.
Hmm.
I think if you looked at his astrological stuff, I have a cursory, I've taken a cursory look, but Trump is a Gemini, which already
Mm.
there explains a lot about him. And
Mm.
also Gemini tends to be connected with local circles. So that's like populism, right? And
Mm.
Cancer, he has some Cancer in there. So I think he really does, quote unquote, love America, but
Mm.
he's doing it in his way. You know, maybe he wants to return to the 1950s era, something like that, when everything was perfect for white America. But again, Trump being a Gemini, he's a mixed bag. Uh, a lot of the blacks in the U.S. have gained jobs since the immigration is down like 70% now. They didn't build a wall, but because of the immigration policy, it's just a point of fact. If you have a less of a pool of people to use for labor, the wages are going to go up, and they're not going to be using the illegal labor. They're going to start going to. It's typically more of the entry level jobs, but black
Mm.
unemployment is way down. But again, like I said, America is America, and when I was younger, it was mainly the left that was pointing out the hypocrisy and the problems with the American capitalism.
Yeah.
But now those voices are pretty much gone. We have two war parties. We have two interventionist parties. The
Mm.
Democrats and the Republicans are pretty much all for the same old program. But it's not gonna last forever. This is kind of a judgment time, and like I said, I think that people need to do their self work,
Hmm.
and we're coming to a time when, because I think Westerners in general, but especially Americans, they're not mentally prepared for the harsh realities of the world, because we've had it very easy. The last crisis we had was like in the 1930s, basically, the
Mm.
great so-called Great Depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
But although you do need money to survive, and a roof overhead helps, and food, but more than that, it's the you have to be spiritually and mentally strong. So I think that while I do follow the news items, I'm not so invested at all in any of these power structures.
Mm.
And they're
No, neither.
probably going to be blown apart, because that's the whole purpose, right?
Mm.
They've been waiting for a long time to implement the next system. But how do you do that? Well, you have to blow up and destroy the old system before you can put the new in. That's what's going to happen this year. It's going to start.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's going to be totally successful, though, because even with these fires in Australia, a lot of Australians are asking questions. It's way too big to be natural.
It is not natural.
Yeah.
And what is also interesting is that with the geoengineering,
Mm-hmm.
the components that are in it, you also find them in sparkler dust.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's here too. The
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we've been
Yeah.
chemtrailed for years,
Mm.
and aluminum powder is an ingredient in thermite, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've been spraying metal particles on the forests and shrubs, then when you light it on fire, it's basically fireworks.
Yeah.
And that I use all kinds of metal powders and shavings in my pyramids. I can't get certain powders off of eBay anymore because they maybe a year or two ago they put restrictions. You know why? If it's smaller than a certain size, it's considered like you might be a terrorist.
Oh, okay.
You know why? Because exactly like you said,
Mm.
metal particles like aluminum are used in bombs, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So, but they're
Yeah.
spraying that. So guess what happens when you light aluminum dust on plants? It's like a sparkler. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Masaki, that was really, really good.
Yeah. Well, we're just shop talking. So I didn't know exactly what you wanted to talk about, but I just have this thought in my mind, so maybe I'll say it. But I was thinking the great spiritual teachers like the Buddha and so forth, they must have had extreme patience,
Oh,
because
yeah.
you're dealing with the human. Because back then, like, barely anybody could read anyway, and now people can read, but they barely take the time to read. And then also, I
And
think
we have more and more people again that cannot read.
and like I was saying, the Orion group, it's not all good. The one of the pole stars in the Orion system is Alpha Draco, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking, because this whole element was never taught when I was in temple, right? But just thinking about it, if the Buddha did come from that dragon bloodline and so forth, and they're basically the magi, the Persian seers, right? To know all the cycles and the rise and fall of Atlantis and Lemuria and so forth, and then the so-called Orion Wars and things between Sirius and Orion.
Mm-hmm.
I could see how that could formulate into a system, a spiritual religious system about the samsara and everything, because he might think like, man, this is getting a little tiring to be doing all this. you
Yeah,
know
I can totally imagine that most of our, if not all, our belief
uh-huh.
systems have their roots there
Mm-hmm.
in Orion. And
Yeah.
yeah. and it's highly questionable how far you get.
Well, the other thing too is, uh, why is it that if if the galaxy is infinite, right?
Hmm.
Why is it we only get the same characters over and over again? It's the Syrians, it's the Orion group, there's reptilians, there's the Mantis, there's Greys, and there's the Pleiadians, and they have some that I'm not too familiar, like Arcturians and things like that. But it's basically a set group that's not that big. Why is that? It's almost like we're in a program, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing, which I've thought about, is why is it that the astrological system, it's like the gods blew themselves up and we're living in the remains of their system.
Mm.
Because like Capricorn is the devil, right? The Saturn, Satan. Aquarius is Lucifer, right? Venus is the goddess. So why is that? Why do the gods with a little g are completely represented in the universe that we live in? It's kind of strange, you know?
And I know there is a lot of, many people are fans of these little gods, yeah, whatever it is. I'm, on the other hand,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm perfectly honest, I have to say, fuck them all.
Yeah, they could go jump in the lake. Well, that's the other thing is, I think we might have talked about how from now, I think it was about 2017 to 2026, there's a couple of transits, but Uranus and Taurus and Neptune and Pisces, but both of these are contributing to the rise of more spiritualism or interest in metaphysics. But at the same time, Taurus is the sign of the dictator or the cult leader, being the fixed sign, but with the Uranian energy, which is basically Aquarian, which is like New Age, right? And so we're still early in the transit, but I've already seen people that are realizing that, oh, the Indian guru I was following is no good. Some of these guys are actually on trial in India for sex crimes and all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading some of the commentary, and one guy was saying, but you need a guru. You need a guru to show you the way. And I'm like, not really.
No.
Not really. I mean, you're always going to have people that know more than you. So you have to start somewhere, whether it's a book or listening to somebody talking. But as far as I have seen, and you have to remember, I come from a temple family. So religions are business. I always knew.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
I always knew, because the church or the temple, it's a business. Sometimes in the ancient past, literally they had the bank in the Saturn temple, right? But we take donations, we do fundraisers. People always give donation for funeral, wedding, whatever. It's a business. Now there's a doctrine and things beyond that also, but it's part, religion's always at least half business, right? But yeah, I mean, I kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm just saying that people, yeah, I remember going back to the cults, people are people, and men are, or the human being, people are imperfect. They're inherently imperfect. If you're perfect, you're not supposed to be on this planet. This is the planet, trash can school of Buddhism. We're the trash people because we are imperfect. That goes for these gurus too. And there's a lot of them, it's just a replay of the 60s and 70s. What always happens? They all end up banging the guru is having sex with all the women, and sometimes the men too, So it as far as I've seen, there's people I respect, but I don't look at them as a higher being, because it's happened over and over again. People are imperfect.
On that note,
Mhm.
have you
Yeah.
seen Messiah?
No.
No,
No.
that new series on Netflix.
Oh
I
no.
binge, I binged watched it.
Hmm.
Yeah, because that totally ties in what you just said. That he has a lot of Dajjal properties.
Oh really?
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Um, at the very beginning, he is in Syria. He is talking to some people, and then a storm comes up out of nowhere,
Hmm.
and these weather events follow him. Yeah, that out of
Hmm.
a sudden there are hurricanes, tornadoes, and what have you, and he's the only one who is standing there, very relaxed.
Hmm. Well,
Yeah.
you know what they say, right? As far as the gods with the little g,
Mm.
they didn't disappear. They just got smaller. Yeah. Maybe the cone head got a little smaller, a little more
Mm.
rounded, because these like the old religions and like probably Germany too, but say old Slavs and even neo-pagans today, they do not take the view of Zechariah Sitchin where it's the gods. They look
Mm-mm.
at them as their familiars, as their progenitors, and they're coming through the bloodline. So they just got smaller, you know. That's what they think.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, and even if they, you know, even if you were look at them as somehow separate, because we live in a holographic system, at some level, we are them and they are us. And you know, the same thing. You think you're above somebody, the at a point in time, the slave becomes the master and the master becomes the slave. The more you think in polar opposites, the more it's like a separation consciousness, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that's the thing too, is like, see, I think that the typical Western mind is very polarized.
Oh yeah.
Whereas a lot of the like the the Asian system or the Buddhist thinking, there's a lot of gray, you know, because I I forgot
A
how
lot
many
of gray.
I forget how they say, but there's yes and there's no, and there's not yes and not no, and then they
Mm-hmm.
said there's not yes no, you know, there's all these in betweens. The West only sees like the black and white.
Mm.
But like I was saying, in my thinking is that yes, you have to have self responsibility. Otherwise, you know, you can't blame other people for your own failures. You have to go do what you're meant to do. But at the same time, I have this thinking that, but I also know that I have a lot less like choice than I think I do, because things are planned out to some extent. But if you do nothing, that's no good either. But you have to have the understanding that maybe your ego self doesn't have as much control as you would want to think,
Mm.
you know.
Um, I also looked at comments um,
Uh-huh.
concerning the Messiah when the trailer was on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
Um, a lot of Muslims are freaking out because of this series, and
Why?
yeah, they feel offended. I mean, yeah.
Well, I mean, this is nothing against anybody,
Mm,
but a lot of your popular religions today, they were eating people not too long ago. There,
mm,
because it's all Saturn based, right?
mm,
It's like
mm. Well,
you could find it, in practically any system,
mm,
but if you are circling the square, if you're
yeah,
circling the black cube,
yeah.
you have to know. Let's say I was an alien. I didn't know anything about your culture or people. I come
Mm.
down and I see a black cube and I go, "Oh, this is Saturn cult."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
So anyway, so people were talking. I mean, the Dajjal is a little bit like the Antichrist. Yeah.
yep, yep.
So, And some people were saying that all this will reveal itself, starting to reveal itself in 2020. And can you see that?
Well, yeah, I said it's gonna be all chips in, right? So
Okay.
they're not, they're gonna go above board. But the thing is that even if the majority of the public is dead asleep, the hardest trick of the magician is the reveal. It's the last part. So because you're not hiding anything anymore, right? This is
No.
this is the revelation of the method. It's gonna be all out in the open. So, you know, I in my mind, I'm thinking it's gonna be pretty crazy in the streets, but I'm not concerned for myself. So, I mean, basically, it is what it is. It is what it is. I feel I'm by no means perfect. I'm still another schizophrenic human being, but I feel as balanced myself as I can be. So what am I supposed to do? I'm doing my work. Every day I'm helping people. I still have, I stopped making basic pyramids. I still have a few of these up on my website, but I have plenty of pendants, shipping out pyramids. And I did my first major live meditation. We had the sound bath, but then it was the first time, and this is quite strong, this pyramid. It's a little bit larger than the other Nubian powered pyramids, but I was running it at 20 volts, which 10 volts is pretty strong for me, but I was wondering if people were going to notice.
Pick it up.
And then also a lot of these people, they do energy work or hands-on healing and things like that. And they said, yeah, my head was buzzing. And I said, good, it was working then. So I'm starting to get out there, do more public things, but this is, in my opinion, this is it. This is it. There is no other time. I don't know what's going to happen into the future. I could be wrong, but I really think this timeline ends at the end of the century, which I may not live to see, but we don't have, basically, this is it. I have friends that they say, like, I can't believe this stuff you post and all this stuff, They're kind of aware of things, but they think somehow they can hide or just go along to get along and they'll be okay. You can do that, but like I was saying, there's no time left. It's only now. And then, the Buddha, he always said that, like, you just live in the now, but literally you look at the cycles and what's happening. This is end game. They are all chips in. And I'm not saying that what they're doing is going to work. If you look, they're already 20 years behind schedule. They were supposed to have it locked down in 1999. They were supposed to put a gold capstone on the Giza pyramid. They didn't do it. So they're behind. But I think that it's that people have to look in themselves. They're of course, these bankers, they've been doing their things for thousands of years, but how do they do what they do? It's because we allow it. So you have to look on yourself and say, like, how am I manifesting what I want positively, or am I contributing through action or non-action what's going on in the world? I mean, I think it's really terrible how many thousands of animals, millions of animals probably have been burned up in Australia. And if people collectively said, no, we don't accept this, it would stop.
Yeah, but they are being told it's a climate crisis.
Yeah. Well, I'm a peaceful guy. I advocate peaceful action, but it could be the fact that the pitchforks might come out for some of these politicians in the near future.
Yeah.
So
they're screaming for it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, we'll see what happens, but I would say that we have more access to energy tools. We have the information it will start to be clamped down this year severely, but in general, compared to, like, say when Tesla was doing his thing,
Mm.
You have a lot of access off the shelf of tools you can use. A lot of them are inexpensive. Um, and if people are thinking it's boring out there or they don't know what to do, you haven't looked hard enough. Because there's a lot you could learn, you know, and a lot of it does not take a lot of
Yeah.
money to
Yeah.
get started. It's
Mm.
mainly up here. It's
Mm.
mainly up here just to realize again what's on the board, what things are interesting to look into, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Boredom is something that I don't know.
oh yeah.
I'm never bored.
Well, that's why I said I don't want to do a whole show on Orion because Judith is thorough. So I don't want to be caught and exposed as I have giant holes in my body of knowledge. Yeah.
And when I spent a couple of days in the hospital
Uh-huh.
last year, yeah, um, I didn't take any book, anything. I don't own a cell phone. I
Uh-huh.
didn't have a book. The TV. Nobody switched on the TV,
Mm-hmm.
so I was just with myself, and I wanted to know if I can handle that,
Mm-hmm.
and I was perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. I have to ask you real quickly because not a lot of people have seen. I was mentioning I have like 3 articles so far on. I called it Secret Japan, but it's basically about
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
occults motifs in Japan that each thing has kind of a implication or hidden meaning, like the crest of the imperial family, which is they call it chrysanthemum seal, the
Mm-hmm.
logo. And then there was one about Shinto, and Shinto is like I guess the native religion of Japan, but
Mm-hmm.
one thing they always have is a mirror, but then it's on a base, which is basically the whole. It's like the crest, right? The moon or horned god. And then the third one, we have this phenomenon in Japan of these megalithic mounds, and there's the
Mm-hmm.
keyhole mound uh, that
The one that
uh,
has the moon and the crescent and the
yeah. So what do you think about? Because see, one thing is they can change history. They can
yeah,
make people forget. But one thing that takes a longer time to erase is the way people dress, the cultural festivals and habits. Embedded in them is some truth. And in the India or like Vedics, they always say that they really don't put a great importance on history because history can always be changed. They put more importance on mythology
yeah,
because in the mythology the truth is maintained. In the history they can always change it, but in more of the subconscious mind, it's the knowledge is retained longer.
mm,
So
yeah, of course.
what do you think? It was interesting because uh, the Ishtar's gate, which is connected to the crest of the emperor in Japan,
Mm,
I I think it is connected because the imperial logo, they say it's the chrysanthemum, but
mm-hmm.
it has 16 petals, right?
Yeah,
And then there's these flowers on Ishtar's gate from Babylon in Iraq.
exactly the same. Yeah.
16. But it's
Mm-hmm.
not just there. It's on other, there was one, Hathor in Egypt had the
Mm-hmm.
same one. And so, I mean, do you think I'm onto something? Because I don't think
Yes,
anybody else
yes.
has talked about it.
I definitely think you're on to something. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Because the occult world usually works via
Uh-huh.
symbols.
That's right. If you ever come to LA, well, before we have the big
You know
one,
how many times I was in LA in my lifetime?
well, there's a
I
new.
spent even weeks and
Uh-huh.
weeks and weeks there during the Gulf Wars.
Uh-huh.
When I landed in LA, I had a
Uh-huh.
week.
Well, there's a new thing downtown Los Angeles, Little Tokyo, where I used to
Hmm.
work. First in Alameda, in front of the Japanese American National Museum, there is a metal cube they put there.
Oh.
And they call it the Omu cube. It's out of many one, and it has all the faces of all the races on this metal cube. And I feel that when they put that in about 5 years ago, the energy of the entire neighborhood changed. But you know, I know a lot about the Japanese American community. I'll just say this because it could be lawsuit. I see through the lens of my community the power structure in general, and every ethnic community is the same basically. And I thought that was very significant that they put the Saturn cube in front of, basically in my, it's a Little Tokyo's a Japanese cultural center. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But see, I think like 99% of them, even hardcore Satanists, they don't even see that. It's only very few people that see what we see. Yeah.
Yeah. Even there you have beginner level and the initiated one.
Oh, and the interesting thing is that I have very good conversations with all people. I talk to the Wee Was Kangs, the Black Man is God people. I talk to them. I talk to like far right white nationalists. I talk to Satanists. At a certain level, the magicians recognize each other. I may disagree with your, some of the things you're doing, but unless you're killing somebody and doing something totally outrageous, we can have a conversation. And I've talked to a lot of people, but it's kind of weird like that. I seem to connect with people from across the spectrum. But the good thing is, like I said, I'm somewhat stubborn in some ways, but I have an open mind. But in having an open mind, I see how people's minds work. So I talk to people in 360 degrees. So it kind of informs, the way I see the world. Yeah.
Yeah. Of course.
Yep. What else, Judith? What should we tell the people? I would say if you have a lot of money in the bank, you might want to take that out because you don't want to be caught. And I'm one of them. I've been I'm sitting on some cash. I think that cryptos might be somewhat of a trap, but I have been waiting to throw some money into Bitcoin, but I've been waiting 2 years, and I still get the feeling, because I cover Bitcoin periodically on my Patreon just because it's my personal interest. I could be totally wrong, but I get the feeling that if it is even viable long term, let's say it's like another 5 years, I feel that that's not the place to be right now. I think the price could totally collapse. And then if it was like $1,000 instead of like 7,000 or 8,000, I would throw in. But I have a lot of different interests. I keep tabs on different things.
Yeah. In general, haven't we been told that the world currency will be electronic?
It's gonna be the gold yuan, crypto yuan. If they did that, there's talk about that. I'm sure you know. If they did that, that would totally flip the script. America would be in trouble.
Yeah. And I also have a problem with the wording, that blockchain system.
The blockchains, like the chains that's holding you down.
Yeah, block and chain. Yeah, these are two words that promise you.
Well, I mentioned him before, but I have a friend. He's a Syrian Canadian guy, Amir Alwani, and he's deep into gematria. And so he and I talked back and forth, and we ran words around cryptocurrency. It connects to Saturn, which is not surprising. Because what symbol rules banking? Is Saturn, right? So this came up I did a talk with Emily Moyer on Off Planet Radio, and she was asking about it. And I said, to me, it's just an acceleration, or it's an Aquarian level of the system we have now. Of, in the US, we literally have a dollar with the Illuminati pyramid with the all-seeing eye. So because we're moving into a new age, the system has to be reformulated. So I don't think it's better or worse. It's just it has to shift to another octave, but it's an acceleration. So it's really more based on the people's consciousness of how they're using it. The way I'm seeing it right now, and you have to think too. You don't think the bankers thought of this 50 years ago? They probably knew. They could be the ones that set it up, right? But as far as I'm seeing right now, I don't see the fruit of what a lot of people said crypto was about, which is about, getting out of the banking system. It's proprietary to you. You're getting out of the system. I don't see that at all. No. But if you hit on the right coins in the short time, you could make some profits, but with any asset that's highly leveraged, extreme profit equals extreme risk. So just know that anything you put into the cryptos, just assume it's a lottery ticket, because it could go to zero. But I'm one of those people, even though I know it's connected to the devil, I'll throw in 1,000 or something like that. We'll see. But even that, it's not at a point right now that I feel that it's worth it. I would have to go maybe 4,000 or lower for me to.
It hit 8,000 today.
Yeah, I mean, what I see, and I've shown this on my Patreon, we're in a descending channel, and it's still, you'd have to break above 9,000 to break the descending channel. So right now, we're in a rally, but unless, like, we've been going like this, right? Unless it breaks out of the channel above 9,000, it's probably a relief rally and probably going to go down. But, in general, like I said, it's for what, because we are coming to crisis time, because it's a reformulation of the system. So I think number one is just be mentally aware, or aware of the movements in society. But whereas the general public will be totally, because they're assuming yesterday is going to, or today and yesterday is going to be like tomorrow. It's not, especially this year. Because 2020, right? 2 is 4. 4 is expected unexpected. It's Uranian energy. It's overturning. It's Aquarian. It's basically, if somebody had a 4, if they're born on the 4th of the month, if it's like 4/13, we know the Templars, right? The Friday the 13th, 13/4 or 22. These people will tend to have very chaotic lives. You know why? Because it's the energy of this year. But people that have been doing their study and are in the esoteric or metaphysical field, you may do better. In fact, you may start hitting a peak of your career from this year into the next couple of years, because Aquarius rules, metaphysics also. It's kind of like, especially, frequency healing, energy healing, that kind of thing. That's going to be a growing field. So, even though in the general background, it's going to be very chaotic, the old answers are not fitting today's situation. So that's why I see people coming to me for readings and so forth, because they're at their wits' end. They're so like, well, this guy's probably crazy and nuts, but I want to hear what he has to say, because what I've been doing ain't working no more. So I need to hear something else. So if you do readings, readers, astrologers, that'll be good. And then also, anytime a system, or let's say economy-wise, when you have a gigantic collapse down or a giant move up, that's energy being released, right? So they're going to start blowing up the system this year, but there's going to be gaps and spaces open that didn't exist before. So it's not going to be everybody, but there's going to be people that, you know, is probably in their life path or whatever, but there's going to be certain people that are going to make fortunes in this time, because it's going to be within a period of maybe a few years or so that there's going to be spaces, there's going to be services needed that you're going to be able to move into that didn't exist before, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a whole article on this.
On your Patreon.
On the Patreon. I'll
Mm-hmm.
send you the link, or I'll post it in the comments on the
Mm-hmm.
video below. But, you know, it's like I say, I do have a bit of hesitation because, you know, the Asians, we like stability. They say they say Asian ruled by Capricorn, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I do have an optimism because that eclipse we had on the 26th, it's a gateway. It's a gateway. And I used to be able to kind of very much predict things, but now I really feel like we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, time to go. It's all on you. You know, it's like if you have your nose on the internet watching videos and everything, and that's all you do, I don't think that's good. This year, you really have to start to become more active.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, okay, guys, that was
Okay.
it. My
Yeah.
flight for today with the wonderful Masaki Miyagawa. We see you all next time, and stay safe and sound. Bye bye.